My daughter forgot to hang up. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the words, though God knows those words are burned into me, but the simple, careless fact that she forgot to hang up. 34 years I raised that girl, packed her lunches, drove her to figure skating at 5:30 in the morning in Mississauga winters when the car wouldn't heat up for the first 10 minutes, sat with her through 2 broken hearts and 1 failed semester at Ryerson. And she forgot to hang up. I was standing at the kitchen counter, still in my scrubs. I'd just finished a 12-hour shift at the hospital. I'm a retired RN now, but back then I was still covering occasional contract shifts at Credit Valley, the kind of work you take because the pension is good, but the body pays for it later. I had kicked off my shoes by the door. I was about to make myself a cup of red rose and call it a night. My phone buzzed. I answered without even looking at the screen, assuming it was my neighbor checking about the recycling schedule. It was my daughter. Or rather, it was the inside of her car. She hadn't meant to call me. The phone had redialed on its own, the way phones do when they're jostling around in a bag or a coat pocket. I could hear the radio in the background, some pop station she always played too loud, and I could hear her talking, and I could hear the voice of the woman who was about to become my son-in-law's mother. I should have hung up. I want to be honest about that. I know I should have pressed the red button the second I realized what was happening, but something in the tone of that other woman's voice made my hand go still. Do you want to know what she said? She said, "The problem with his mother is she doesn't know her place. She thinks because she's helping with the money, that makes her family." There was a pause. Then my daughter laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an uncomfortable laugh. A real one. "She means well," my daughter said. "But honestly, the less she's involved, the better. She'll just make everything about herself." I stood at my kitchen counter with a mug in my hand and the kettle starting to whistle, and I did not move for a long time. Let me tell you a little about myself, because it matters to this story. I'm 63 years old. I was born in Hamilton, Ontario, the third of 5 children in a Jamaican-Canadian household where you did not waste anything. Not food, not time, not money, and certainly not love. My mother worked at a textile factory for 22 years. My father drove a city bus. They put all 5 of us through school on 2 working-class salaries without ever once asking for thanks. I carried that. I carried it through nursing school, through a marriage that lasted 19 years before it didn't, through raising my daughter mostly on my own after my ex-husband moved out to BC and slowly became a Christmas card, and then eventually not even that. I carried it through the nights when my daughter was sick, and I was the only parent in the house. Through every school trip form I signed alone, every parent-teacher interview I sat at alone, every graduation I clapped at alone. I'm not saying this for sympathy. I'm saying it because when my daughter said the less she's involved, the better, I want you to understand exactly how much that sentence cost me. I named her Yvonne, after my mother's sister who died young. I always thought the name carried something, a kind of grace, a kind of continuity. I thought I was passing something forward. The man she was marrying, I'll call him my son-in-law because that's what he became eventually, was from a family in Oakville. Old money, or at least the kind of money that looks old even when it isn't. His mother, the woman I'd heard on the phone, had grown up in Forest Hill, attended private school, and spent the better part of 30 years making sure everyone within 20 feet of her understood that she had grown up in Forest Hill and attended private school. I had met her 3 times before that phone call. The first time, she looked at my shoes, not my face, my shoes. The second time, she asked me what part of Jamaica I was originally from, even though I was born at St. Late, Joseph's Hospital in Hamilton, and have a Hamilton Spectator birth announcement to prove it. The third time, she told me that she'd always believed the mother of the groom should really take the lead on these things, meaning the wedding, meaning my daughter's wedding, the wedding that I was helping to finance. Because I was helping to finance it. Significantly. My daughter and her fiancé had a lovely apartment in Etobicoke, but weddings in this city are not inexpensive, and they had come to me together, holding hands on my couch, if I might be able to help with some of the costs. I said yes. I said yes, the way any mother says yes when her daughter sits in front of her looking hopeful and a little embarrassed to be asking. I contributed $45,000. I want to be precise about that. Not because money is the point, but because what happened next makes no sense unless you understand the number. After the phone call, I did not phone my daughter back. I did not text. I did not call her fiancé or his mother or anyone. I made my tea. I sat down at the kitchen table, and I thought, I am a person who thinks before I act. It is probably the most useful thing nursing taught me, not the clinical skills, though those matter, but the discipline of not reacting in the middle of a crisis. You do not panic when a patient is crashing. You assess, you prioritize, you act from information, not emotion. So I thought about the seating chart that had come to me 2 weeks earlier, the one where I had been placed at table 9, not the head table, not table 1, where my daughter's fiancé's mother and his aunts and his grandmother were seated. Table 9, near the back, near the bar station, next to a colleague of the fiancé's from work whom I had never met and would presumably never meet again. I had told myself it was an oversight, that Yvonne had been overwhelmed with the planning, that these things happen. I thought about the florist consultation I had been excluded from. My daughter told me afterward that it had just come together quickly, that there hadn't been time to loop me in. The florist was a woman in Mississauga who had been in business for 30 years. These consultations do not happen quickly. I thought about the dress fitting, my daughter's dress fitting, where I had been told the time wrong and arrived 40 minutes after it had ended. My daughter apologized. Her future mother-in-law did not. I thought about how, 2 months earlier, I had overheard my daughter on the phone call, her future mother-in-law, Mom. She has never in her life called me anything but Mom. I was the only one, and then, one day, I wasn't. The next morning, I called my financial advisor. His office is on Ontario Street. I've worked with him for 11 years. I told him I needed to restructure some of the arrangements I had put in place. He asked if everything was all right. I told him I was fine. I told him I was making some changes, and I wanted to be careful and correct about the process. We spoke for an hour. By the end of that call, I had put a pause, a legal, formal pause, on the transfer of the final installment of funds I had promised for the wedding. I had not yet transferred that last portion. There was still time. Then I called my sister in Brampton. My sister is 4 years older than me and has the kind of clarity that comes from having survived things quietly. I told her what I had heard on the phone. I did not cry while I told her. I cried after when she said, "Oh, baby," in exactly the voice our mother used to use, and something in me came apart a little. She told me not to do anything in anger. She told me to give myself a few days. I gave myself 3 days. On the 4th day, I called my daughter. I asked her if she had time to come by the house. I told her I'd made soup. She loves my chicken soup, the Jamaican kind with choo-choo and dumplings, the kind that takes 4 hours and fills the whole house. I made it on purpose. I wanted her to walk in and smell home, smell everything I was and everything I had given her. I wanted her to remember. She came on a Thursday evening. She sat at the same table where I had sat 3 nights earlier with my cold tea. I waited until she had a bowl in front of her. Then I said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." She looked up. "Do you still want me at your wedding?" She put her spoon down. Her face went through several things at once. I recognized all of them. I had watched that face for 34 years. "Mom, of course." "What kind of question is that?" "An honest one." She started to say something reassuring, the kind of thing you say when you're trying to manage a person. I recognize that too. I've sat at enough bedsides to know the difference between honesty and comfort. I said, "Your phone called me by accident 3 nights ago. I heard your conversation in the car." The silence that followed was one of the longest of my life. Her face changed. The managing look left it entirely. What replaced it was something I had not expected. Not guilt, not anger. Shame, real shame. The kind that comes from knowing you were wrong before someone told you so. "Mom, I don't want an apology tonight," I said. "I want you to understand what I heard, and I want you to understand what I've been watching happen over the past several months. And I want us to be honest with each other, maybe for the first time in a while." We talked for 3 hours. By the end of it, we had both cried. She told me things I had not known, that her future mother-in-law had told her months ago, that immigrant parents can sometimes be overwhelming at events like this, and it's kinder to give them a quieter role. That phrase. I want you to sit with that phrase for a moment. A quieter role. My daughter, to her credit, told me she had known it was wrong when she heard it. She told me she had laughed in the car because she was nervous, not because she agreed. She told me she had been trying to keep the peace. I told her that peace kept at my expense was not peace. It was just silence with a different name. I did not cancel the wedding. I want to be clear about that, because I think the easy story, the satisfying story, is the one where the wronged mother pulls out completely and watches everything collapse. That's not what happened. That's not who I am. What I did was simpler and, I think, more lasting. I called my financial advisor back. I told him to hold the remaining funds in a separate account. Not cancelled, just held. Not a withdrawal. A pause. And I put conditions on the release in writing through a family solicitor I had worked with before on my estate documents. The conditions were reasonable. They were written clearly. They did not threaten anyone. They simply said, the funds would be released when certain agreements were made in writing about the nature of my role and my presence at my daughter's wedding. I also asked, through my solicitor's letter, that a prenuptial agreement be drawn up. Not for reasons of malice, but because I had just learned that my daughter had been characterized, in my absence, as a person who needed to be managed. I wanted to know that if this marriage ever became difficult, my daughter would have protections in place. I said so, plainly. I said I was asking not to undermine the marriage, but to protect my child. The letter went to my daughter first. Then, with her knowledge, to her fiancé. He called me himself 2 days later. He did not call to argue. He called because, he said, he had not known. He had not known what his mother had said in that car. He had not known about the seating chart, not the original version. He had been handed a final version, and the positioning of Table 9 had been explained to him as my preference. My preference. That I had apparently requested a quieter spot. The silence on the phone between us was painful in the way that only happens when two people are realizing at the same moment that they've both been handled. He said, "I'm sorry, I should have been paying more attention. It was more than I expected and exactly what I needed." The wedding happened. It was at a vineyard in Prince Edward County. My son-in-law's family had connections there, and I will admit it was beautiful. The vines in October, the light the way it gets in the fall in that part of Ontario, a certain golden flatness that makes everything look like it matters. I sat at table 2, next to my sister from Brampton and my old friend from the hospital I've known for 27 years, and my son-in-law's grandmother, who turned out to be a retired schoolteacher from Sudbury with strong opinions about Tim Hortons and a very good sense of humour. My daughter's future mother-in-law sat at table 1. We did not speak much. We did not need to. Before the ceremony, my son-in-law came to find me in the room where I was waiting. He straightened his jacket, which didn't need straightening. He said, "Thank you for being here." And then, after a pause, like he was deciding something, "Thank you for not walking away." I thought about my own mother. about the textile factory and the Hamilton winters and the 5 children and the way she never once asked for thanks. That's what mothers do, I said. The prenuptial agreement was signed. Not because anyone forced it. My son-in-law suggested it himself, after the phone call, after he'd had time to think. My daughter signed it willingly. She told me later that she felt, for the first time in months, like someone was actually in her corner. I was always in her corner. She just needed to remember that I was allowed to be. The funds were released. Every dollar. The final installment cleared on the Tuesday morning, 2 weeks before the wedding, after all the written agreements were in place. My financial advisor called to confirm. He said, before he hung up, "You handled that with a lot of grace, for the record." I don't know about grace, for the record. I know I didn't yell. I know I didn't beg. I know I sat at a kitchen table with a cup of tea, and I thought, and then I acted from what I knew rather than from what I felt. My late mother used to say, "Don't move loud. Move right." I tried to move right. My daughter calls me every Sunday now. She has called me every Sunday since October. Sometimes we talk for 20 minutes, sometimes for 2 hours. Last week she told me that her mother-in-law had asked, through her son, whether I might be willing to join them all for Christmas dinner at the house in Oakville. I said I would think about it. My daughter laughed, a real laugh, the kind I recognize, the kind from when she was small, and she said, "She's scared of you, Mum. I think she finally understood she should be." I told my daughter that was not the goal. She said she knew. She said the goal was exactly what happened, that everyone in that room now knew what I was willing to do, which meant no one would ever again need me to do it. I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. I'm still thinking about it. I'm 63 years old. I have worked hard every day of my adult life. I have given money and time and sleep and worry the way mothers do, without keeping a ledger, without expecting a return. I did not stand up for myself because I wanted to be feared, or because I wanted to be feared, or because I wanted to win. I stood up for myself because one night I was standing at a counter in my kitchen, still in my scrubs, and I heard my daughter's voice through a phone she forgot to hang up, and something in me went very quiet and very clear. Quiet enough to think, clear enough to act. That, I think, is the whole story. I've thought about that Thursday evening many times since then. The soup on the stove. My daughter's face going through all those things at once. The moment she stopped managing me and started being honest with me instead. What I keep coming back to is this. Nothing that happened was an accident. Not the good parts, and not the painful ones either. There's a logic to how things unfold when people make choices. A kind of quiet accounting that doesn't announce itself but always, eventually, settles. My daughter's mother-in-law made a choice. She decided that I could be categorized, handled, and quietly moved to the edges of my own child's wedding. She made that choice not out of cruelty, I think, but out of something smaller and sadder, a need to be the most important woman in the room, and a belief that someone like me, with my background and my accent and my shoes, could be repositioned without consequence. She was wrong about the consequence. She was wrong because she didn't stop to ask what kind of woman I actually was. That's the thing about underestimating people. It always costs more than you think. What protected me? What protected all of us in the end, including my daughter, wasn't anger. Anger was there. I won't pretend it wasn't. But I didn't move from anger. I moved from something steadier. I sat at that kitchen table and I made myself think clearly about what was true, what was fair, and what I was and wasn't willing to accept. That kind of thinking, the disciplined kind, the kind that doesn't flinch from hard facts, is something I learned over decades. You learn it in a nursing ward at 2 in the morning. You learn it raising a child alone. You learn it from a mother who worked a factory line for 22 years and never once felt sorry for herself. It doesn't come from anywhere easy. And then there's the matter of what I actually did. I didn't threaten. I didn't perform. I wrote a letter through a solicitor. I paused a transfer and I asked for a conversation with my daughter. A real one, over soup, at a kitchen table. Those were the three moves. They worked not because they were dramatic, but because they were grounded. I knew what I had contributed. I knew what I was entitled to ask for. I knew that love and accountability are not opposites, that you can love someone completely and still require them to treat you with honesty. My daughter knows something now that she didn't fully know before. She knows that I will show up for her completely every time. And that showing up completely means I will also tell her the truth when it's hard. That's not conditional love. That's real love. The kind that can hold a difficult conversation over chicken soup and still be standing at the end of it. I think about what I want to leave her with when all of this is eventually behind us. Not money, though I hope there's some of that too. What I want to leave her is the understanding that you do not have to choose between being kind and being strong, that real integrity, the kind that holds even when nobody's watching, even when it costs you something, is the only thing that actually lasts. That when someone tries to make you smaller, the answer is not to become louder. The answer is to become clearer. My mother used to say, "Don't move loud, move right." I'm 63 years old. I think I'm finally getting it right.